Hey friends, it's Ernie with the Trader of Futures. And today's show is titled Critical Thinking on Bitcoin, Marijuana, and Futures. Now, the reason why I'm repeating the title right now is that I want to make a prediction that this show is probably not going to be heavily watched. And why is that? Because nobody wants to get lectured on how to be a critical thinker because everyone thinks they think critically. A lot of people have the misconception that thinking critically means thinking bad of things or putting your own spin on it, being critical of it. They don't even understand what the meaning is. But being a critical thinker is absolutely essential in getting to the truth and understanding why things are the way they are, or at least getting closer to that understanding, or getting to the understanding that you simply don't understand, or there is no way to get closer to a full understanding. And that's an important distinction. But critical thinking is sadly lacking in just about every aspect of today's culture. So what I'm going to do right now is, well, let me start by this. How do you become a critical thinker? What are the components of critical thinking? Do you even understand that? Do you the best way to get into this whole theory of this, it's more of a discipline than anything else. And it should be like one of those basic disciplines that most people take up, like basic home finance, or even home, what we used to call home economics, not the cooking class, and because that's what they taught us in school, although the boys weren't required to take it when I was a kid. Pretty sexist, right? But they didn't really talk about the economics, the economic aspect of running a home or running your life. I think we would do really well to have even like a MacGyver type course where you learn how to be a prepper or a survivalist. And not saying that you want to become one of those, because, some people, or people that are identified with that, tend to be way out on the edge. But at the same time, those skills that they use and things that they practice are all parts of being critical thinkers. They're prepping, they're preparing. They're preparing based on, you would hope, on fact-based knowledge. Sometimes they invent a world of their own and want to prepare for that. And it's not just preppers that do this. It's virtually everybody that is involved, not virtually everybody, but a good portion of the people that are involved in the crypto space. They have this notion, this idealized utopia-like notion or vision of what society will be like in the future, where we no longer have to really rely on each other because humans are so unreliable. And instead, we'll rely on the machine, forgetting completely that the machines were created by people and run by people and manipulated by people. But it seems that, anytime there's a sufficient level of technology, we're willing to give up a portion of our brains and offload it to this thing. In particular, these days, that thing is that thing that everybody has their face in all the time. The smartphone, the iPhone, the Samsung, the Android. Not so much the Windows phone. But there's not a whole lot of critical thinking going on there. What we're really looking for there are sound bites and ways to present ourselves, the idealized vision of ourselves to the rest of the world. Again, that's not critical thinking. So what is critical thinking? I'm going to look up, I'm going to just look that up. Let's look that up. Critical thinking. What the hell is critical thinking? All right, so so we'll do both the Google results and maybe we'll even do the Bing results. Let's do Bing. Bing, bing, bing. Ricochet rabbit. That's probably way before many of your time. It's a cartoon of my youth. So we'll do critical thinking in Bing too. Now that's kind of interesting. I want to show this to people. All right, so these are the Bing results. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process. I don't know why they needed to have an adjective there. Critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and/or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication as a guide to belief and action. Well, that's a mouthful. In its exemplary form, it is based on universal intellectual values that transcend subject matter divisions, clarity, accuracy, precision. Oh, wait a minute. They're saying that there are actual universal thought processes. Of course, the far left has their version of critical thinking, as does the far right. And they're very, very different things. One based more in objectification and the other one based more in feeling. So these are universal thought processes that transcend subject matter divisions. In other words, things like race or identity politics. Clarity, accuracy, precision, consistency, relevance, sound evidence, good reason, depth, breadth, and fairness. So this is criticalthinking.org, this passage. Let's see what... So Google, their presentation of this isn't quite this. It's very similar, though. You have this feedback. People ask. So they have the same thing. People also ask. I gotta wonder where that's from. It's the same thing on Bing and Google. I can't imagine that there must be like a third-party service or something. But why is critical thinking important in education? Let's see. Look at the order on Bing. How many elements of thinking are there? What are the characteristics of critical? When do we use critical thinking in everyday life? And then if we go to what are the 5 critical thinking skills? What is critical thinking skills? What does it mean to critically think? What are the 6 critical thinking skills? So there's either 5 or 6, I guess. How does that differ again from why, how, what, when? Now, isn't that interesting? So the Microsoft Bing answers it in the who, what, when, how, why, where type of format, where Google, it's all about the what. So what I'm doing here is I'm employing critical thinking in analyzing in the way that the 2 different search services present the search results. And I think that in of itself deserves a little bit of attention. And maybe you can make some assumptions, or at least dig a little deeper and find some commonality or stark differences in the way Microsoft versus Google approaches search results. Now, just going down that process is all a part of critical thinking. You have to employ, certain skills, analytical skills, where you look at each of the individual parts of the thing that you're analyzing, discover their nature, break them down into their base or predecessors. Look at what their actual function is and how they work in the world and how they relate to other things. And then from that, you develop a more fluid picture of what you're talking about. Now, according to Google, some of those skills include, well, analyzing is that first thing that I just talked about, applying standards. Of course, picking the right standards can be a chore. It can be something that you would do after you've done critical thinking, or you allow someone else to provide you with something that's worth looking at and trust that they have, superior knowledge or precedent that you can rely on. And that's really one of the problems I have with Bitcoin, is that virtually everybody that's in this area, that they're envisioning this new future, but there's no precedent for it. There's nothing even close to a precedent for it. In fact, every attempt to create a decentralized universe, at least from a trust point of view, and that's really what they're doing. They're trying to take the human out of the equation. That whole idea it doesn't work. And to me, one of the things I see getting hidden in all of this decentralization is that they're not really talking about decentralization. In fact, I think they're talking about the opposite of decentralization. They want everybody to get into this sort of group think, which is, in fact, highly centralized. The greatest experiment on the planet ever of decentralization is not Bitcoin. It is the government that we have here in the United States, without a doubt. The Constitution is perhaps the most successful and greatest experiment in human history. It's lasted now for almost 300 years. That, in fact, is the greatest experiment and actual boots on the ground proof of how a decentralized system would work. It's not really decentralized. Well, it is decentralized, but there's a limit to decentralization. That Bitcoin wants you to bring decentralization to its ultimate limit. But there's a great deal of volatility if you try to do that. And it doesn't account for everybody's, again, I'm doing some critical thinking here. Anyways, some of the other skills that are required. Discriminating. Yeah, discriminating. You should be able to embrace biases. If you're always taking the middle road, you never get anywhere. You're accepting of every idea. Not every idea is really worth accepting or has merit. This whole idea that everything has to have some sort of equal footing is bull. That doesn't allow you to be a critical thinker. It's good to step back and recognize those things that you've developed biases on and those things that you think might have universal appeal versus those things that don't. And in fact, that is also a discriminating skill. Information seeking. Now, there's something that most people lack dramatically. They don't take the time to go out there and look for the information or learn about what other people have done in the past, how they have approached the problem, why they've approached the problem. What is the current state of art? Who's involved? What is their background? What is their motivation? Next skill, and this is a big one that most people have really very little knowledge of, and that's logic and reasoning. And Perhaps the best way to get into that in being a skeptic and understanding logic and logical fallacies. Then you start understanding how people use speech in order to make things sound good, but don't really meet the muster of logic. They try to trick you with feint moves, both in words and actions. But if you become someone who is a student of logical fallacies, you can pick apart someone's argument. Most people speak in cliches, and they use those cliches as a substitute for real thought. Using logic and reason, you can beat their argument. Well, there's another problem, trying to beat somebody's argument, which isn't necessarily a very easy thing to do, because most people are, regardless of how wrong they are, really want to hold on to. There's this, hold on to their belief, because that's really the structure that is holding up their sanity. And by breaking that down, yes, you are making them insane. Predicting. I don't know how predicting, I guess being able to have some forethought and see some momentum in ideas or logical conclusions that will result of something but I don't see how that is necessarily a critical thinking skill. Well, maybe I'll take that back. Based on that critical thinking, that you should come up with some kind of rationale of why things ended up the way they do, or rationale on what's the most likely way that I would say, instead of predicting, I would say that understanding statistics, at least at the very basic level, is probably a good idea. Transforming knowledge. I'm not sure exactly what they're talking about there, but probably it means taking knowledge from other cultures or data sets that apply to one thing, that have tenets in it that are universal and apply to something else. And so being able to use that as sort of a metaphorical basis for understanding something else. Maybe that's what transforming knowledge means. So let's see, we'll go to, now on Bing, actually I like the Bing search results a little bit better than Google, even though I'm not a Microsoft fan, although I'm becoming less of a Google fan too. So maybe I need to start jumping back and forth and start looking at Bing a little bit more. But the first item in Bing is, why is critical thinking important in education? Now there's something to think about. Why is it important? Of course it's important. I don't even know why you would ask the question. A better question would be, why don't they teach critical thinking in education? And the reason why they don't, or at least they may present the subject matter, but they cloud it and obfuscate it by introducing the biases of the teachers and the professors, who are usually politically motivated. And this is not a conspiracy or anything like that. It is well-known fact that academia, at least in the United States, is 80 to 90% of all people within academia are left-leaning. And there's been multiple studies on this. I just saw one just the other day showing colleges and their political affiliation. It's just unbelievable, the difference between those that support more liberal candidates and parties versus those that are more conservative. It's stark. Unbelievable. So you got to wonder then, if somebody is carrying with them their political bias, how can they teach critical thinking? So it leaves it up to you. Perhaps you can get some of the basic tenets of that thinking, but the conclusions, within that educational system. But it really relies on you to be able to come outside of that educational system and think for yourself. That's one thing that I don't let's see, do they even talk about that? Having independent thought. How many elements of thinking are there? They don't say critical thinking, just thinking. Eight basic structures. Now, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole about thinking. We don't want to think too much. When do we use critical thinking in everyday life? I would argue that you use it almost every second of the day. Virtually every move, every breath that you take is the result of some form of critical thinking. Some of it is not even thinking, it is automatic response. When an individual can determine whether a problem is under control or beyond his control and can recognize his limitations regarding money, time, and power, then he is using critical thinking in everyday life. So only money, time, and power are where we're trying to gauge our limitations. What about just taking a step and not, stepping on a crack and breaking your mother's back? That's important too. However, that can only be accomplished with regular practice according to the foundation for critical thinking. Yeah, I'd say it's the scope of critical thinking goes way beyond understanding and recognizing the limitations of time, power, and money. I mean, it really even comes down to the food that you eat, the people you talk to, the things that you say, arguments, or the approach that you take in different cultural situations. Everything that you do there's critical thinking to it. So anyways, so that's enough about, what it is. And the reason why I'm bringing all this up is that in trading, critical thinking is an absolute essential skill that you need to develop. And it's not something that you can just, hopefully you'll get better at. This is something, or that it will be something that you attend to every once in a while and think about it. Maybe you listen to a podcast. It's something that you need to practice every day, every hour of every day, every minute of every day, and be cognizant of it. Because someone is always trying to pull the wool over your eyes. Always. Everyone comes in with their own agenda and biases, as you will. And being able to discern between those and those, in whether or not they hold water in terms of how rational or logical it is, will require you to understand the tenets of critical thinking. All right, so what are the characteristics of critical? Now, they don't say critical thinking, they just say critical. Critical characteristics of key product. See, they're conflating, at least in Microsoft Bing search response, they're conflating specific things and how you would go about assessing critical nature of that thing. So in this overview block in there, they're talking about the critical characteristics of injection molded plastics. And of course, yeah, sure. Dimension, tolerance, finish, material, and assembly and manufacturing or inspection process, operation, field maintenance, and yeah, all that stuff is very important. But it has nothing to do with your approach to life and everyday life and critical thinking and approaching people with things to say and things to evaluate, behaviors. There's a book that I'm currently reading that I think that is very good. Actually, reading is a misnomer, and it is on Audible. And let me see if I can bring that up. Yeah. We'll share this page here. So there's a very well-known author, Stephen Novella. He's actually a neurosurgeon, a neurosurgeon. And he has several podcasts, several books that he's written. And this is his latest book. Actually, I don't know that this is his latest book. This looks like it's back from 2013. But it's an excellent book. And it's kind of an encyclopedia of critical thinking and understanding how the brain works and what things can kind of fool us. He has a book called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, and he has a podcast by the same name, and I think that that's worthy a note. But this is the type of thing that you need to do. You need to start reading and educating yourself and understanding this stuff. There was a website that I had that had all the logical fallacies. There's something on the order of 300 logical fallacies out there. And I thought that was interesting too. Very worthy of your time. But this Audible book is very good. Your Deceptive Mind, a scientific guide to critical thinking skills. And this is more like an encyclopedia. It goes into every aspect, right down to human behavior and our limitations and our both sociological and psychological limitations in our perceptive powers and how we can easily get fooled. And yeah, I would highly suggest this book. As a matter of fact, I would give this five stars across the board. All right. Now's the time to go and look at what you have to say. I thought I had this page opened. Just a second. I'm going to the comments to see what everyone's saying. So one of the reasons why I put in Bitcoin, marijuana, and trading, those are all, I think, fairly involved topics that are, to a large extent, people have very highly refined views of each of those things and very opinionated one way or the other. But let's read what we have here. Coiners are lazy and spoiled. Yes. They're all looking for the quick route through the woods. But that's not just coiners. I've seen the same thing in other things that people kind of coalesce around or become cultish-like with, like the silver crowd, for instance, at least in the context of, and also in politics. Dear Ernie, many say BTC is going up. They're always saying that. Always. but volume is low. Yeah, so you're doing a little critical thinking on your own. CB, do you think the Republicans will remain in control of the House and Senate, or do you think that there will be a blue wave in November? I think that most people have at least a modicum of critical thinking and watched those Senate hearings and saw them for what they were, a complete charade, a witch hunt. And I think that the other thing is, if you go and look at SCOTUS nominations over the years, over the past 30 years, you will find something very interesting. Whenever there was a Democrat nominee, there was bipartisan support. In other words, the Republicans, along with the Democrats, all voted usually in the affirmative. Whenever there was a Republican nominee, the vote was almost split right down the middle by party line. So from that, you can infer that the Democrats don't give a shit about what Republicans think, but the Republicans think what Democrats think. And I think people are starting to realize this. But I think the Republicans are going to change that tune going forward. No longer are they willing to be looking for the middle ground or the concession or whatever and do what they think is right. I think it's going to get even more hyper partisan. But it wasn't them that started it. If you go back and look, it is definitely on the left side. So I don't think there's going to be a blue wave. As a matter of fact, I think there's going to be an anti-blue wave. Many are saying it's going down as well. Many are saying it's going down as well. Frederick, I think that you're replying to the Bitcoin volume or the price. The Watcher, critical thinking lives on CNN. Oh, no, it doesn't. Millennials are the kids who got a prize for showing up. Yeah, it's part of that, but it's not their fault. It's the fault of the educators and the fault of the culture. And at the end, if the Democrats win in the midterms, how will that affect the stock market, the crypto market, in your opinion? I think it will be disastrous because they're going to try to undo, just out of spite, not because it's right or wrong, they're going to try to undo everything that Trump did. So in other words, they're going to bring back all the regulation. They're going to squash the tax cuts. They're going to raise taxes. They're going to do everything the opposite. They're even going to try to impeach Trump as well as impeach Kavanaugh. That's just crazy. This is not me saying that. This is what they've said. This is what senators have said. Today, people are gamers looking for the cheat code. That is their skill. Yeah. Cassia says, hey, Ernie. Hey, y'all. How's it going? Well, that's a great comment. It's going good. Robert Leonardo, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Logic is the sea of communication. We all swim in we cannot escape it. Although Democrats are trying really hard using their relativistic philosophy. Actually, they have a philosophy called critical theory, but it has absolutely nothing. As a matter of fact, it's like the exact opposite of critical thinking. It has more to do with like the Saul Alinsky rules of radicals. You ought to read that sometime. AI voltage. People would leave the Democrat Party if critical thinking were taught. Yeah. Yeah, well, they would see it for what it is, or at least some of them. The left and right both suffer from forming ideas from feelings. Right equals tribalism, tradition, left equals identity politics. Yeah, I think that's a little myopic, but there is some truth to that. Liberals are lazy people who want stuff. Not all liberals. And it depends on what you're talking about, a liberal. I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think that there are some lazy Republicans too, or conservatives. Not many. Liam asks, is critical thinking really thinking or just bias? Now, bias and forming ideas is part of critical thinking. Informing biases that set up, your kind of universality of rules and how you approach things. So it's a very deep and broad subject. So I wouldn't try to just put it down to a couple of words. Truth exists. Yeah, we just have to find it. Cal Holy, at the stop sign, do I stop? Do I go? Do I kill myself? Yeah. I guess your point is that even at the stop sign, you make some critical judgments, Am I in real life? Or am I in Grand Theft Auto? If I think, therefore, I am? Yes. That's everyone's trying to get a little bit too esoteric here. Critical thinking is about questioning versus blindly following like sheep. Yeah, that's part of it. Questioning everything and analyzing it. Critical thinking is a check on biases and assumptions. That's absolutely correct, Darth Norm. Darth Norm. That's a cool name. Who uses Bing? It's the first time I've used Bing in a long, long time, but I thought I'd give it a shot, and I was quite surprised, actually. I like the search results on at least that one thing better than the Google results. To a limit. I mean, they make it an attempt to do the who, what, when, where, how, why, where Google just does the what. Unfortunately, some of the contextual stuff that it returned was not really relevant or useful. You want to be successful in today's market? Understand your opponent is a criminal and does not follow the rules because they are happy to pay the fine when they get caught. It could be. Trojan Hell. Critical thinking is tricky. You can easily trap yourself with your own bias. This is one of the reasons why you have to have kind of a process around it. And, like in Buddhism, we're taught to be critical thinkers and be objective in the reality of the world. But at the same time, we try to be objective about our own subjectivity. In other words, we try to step back and actually look at our own thinking and evaluate our own thought. And so I think that's an important thing. So I agree with you, Trojan Hill, that in order to avoid going down that or becoming too biased or too myopic, you need to step back and then evaluate your own thinking, which is a skill in itself. The most liberal states have the highest amount of federal funding contribution. The most conservative states tend to accept the most federal funding. Data doesn't support your claim. What claim? Most liberal states have the highest amount of federal funding contribution. The most conservative states tend to accept the most federal funding. Data, I don't know what you're talking about. Sorry. The most liberal states are all broke. Why is this? I'm not trying to make this an argument between liberal and conservative. There are some areas of liberal thought, at least in classical liberal thought, that are quite useful. In fact, I consider myself largely a classical liberal, which is completely different from today's liberals. I can't send links on here, Robert. Simply Google it. If the data presented is official, why dismiss it because you dislike the New York Times? I would say that if you're going to be critical, then anything that the New York Times or anything that any news outlet publishes, you need to be critical of that. I know for a fact that most news outlets only report their version of what they think is the truth. Journalism is one of those areas that has lost its basis in critical thinking. There's no difference between Republicans and Democrats. Both do the same thing, but wear different jerseys. They don't do the same thing. They come from it at different places. But I would say that both are more interested in power than doing the right thing. It's not millennials' fault. I feel bad for them because most are not bad people. Well, I don't think anybody at their core is a bad person, or not many people. There are some people that are just plain evil, but most people are not bad people, but they get born into situations that they cannot escape. I love your insight and wisdom. What is your definition of happiness? What is happiness to me? Well, happiness to me is being able to be free to think as I wish. I'm going to think about that a bit. What is happiness to me? And I'll come back with an answer, probably not today. Ernie, off the air, log out of your YouTube. What happened here? I just lost something. Oh, it looks like that that message, as I was reading it, was retracted. That's interesting. Today's liberal is not liberals of the past. Oh, now it's back on. Cal Holy. Ernie, off air, log out of your YouTube account and go into your video comments and see if your personal comments are hidden. Been seeing a lot of shadow banning leading up to the coming elections. That may be true. I've been shadow banned on Twitter for sure, and severely dealt a blow to my verified account. I went from 200,000 impressions a day down to 2,000. 100 times decrease in my effective reach. Ernie, did you look deeper into weather futures? No, not yet. I mean, I've been thinking about it for a long time. It's not something I have really the time or bandwidth to do right now. But it sounds interesting. All right, so that's today's show on critical thinking. I often, talk about books and things that I suggest to read. I suggest getting some podcasts, some books on critical thinking. Start studying it. Start studying logical fallacies. I think that's another important thing. Start understanding things like scientific method and philosophy. Alex says, you are setting up a straw man argument. Liberals are defined by left-wing voices who focus on identity politics. Left also has economic policies. Also, centrists today are seen as left-leaning. But I'm not setting up a straw man. I mean, these are objective things that you can look at and decide for yourself. And I agree with everything that you just said there, that politics in general and the culture is definitely leaning left. That doesn't mean that, everybody, but there's definitely a left lean. And I think that there's going to be a swing in the pendulum the other way sometime in the near future, because it is getting kind of extreme. All right, that's it. We are at the end of this program. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I also want to tell you that I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing these daily shows. I may be bringing them to Twitch TV. I would argue the opposite. Culturally, we are left. Politically, very right. I don't know that you can really separate the two like that, cultural and political. But anyways, what I wanted to say is that I don't know how much longer I'm going to be doing this live show, at least here on YouTube. I'm going to be moving it over to Twitch TV. And the reason for that is that the person who is offering me the seat there, they have a much larger audience. And so I'm going to go back to producing content-rich videos for this channel. And then doing the live show over there. I'm going to at least try it for the next month. And this hasn't been a full-time thing, and it's not going to be this week, probably next week. So I just thought I'd give you a heads up. I'm not going to stop. I am not stopping. I'm just moving the venue. And I will provide all the linkages that you need to get there. So don't worry. But quite frankly, there's a bigger audience there, and we have this kind of chat capability so we can talk to each other. All right. Now that's it. We'll see you tomorrow. What about Bitcoin reviews? I'll be talking about those there. It's going to be a wide open show. It's going to be the Ernie show, just like it is here. I talk about Bitcoin here. I'll talk about Bitcoin there. I'll talk about weed. I'll talk about philosophy. I'll talk about critical thinking, logic, and reason. I'll talk about current culture. I'll even talk about politics. Not too much, though. So we'll see you all. Have a great day. Bye.